Teachers of Reddit, how easy is it to tell if a kid has a crush on somebody, and what are some entertaining stories surrounding that? Story 1. Used to be a Calculus 1 teaching assistant. This really smart kid kept coming to the teacher's assistant sessions because he very obviously had a crush on a girl who would show up to after hours. They would both be the only two people in the sessions. When they needed homework help, I'd ask them to solve problems together and come to me if they had any questions, while I pretended to catch up on work but actually just played GTA on my laptop. Sometimes I'd overhear them talking and getting to know each other. It was cute. He sure did make my life a hell of a lot easier. Story 2. Right now I have two kids in my first period that just don't leave each other alone. The girl constantly complains if the boy doesn't show up to school. He's always pulling on her hair or finding any excuse to touch her. He likes to play thumb wars just to hold hands. It's really cute but also annoying because they refuse to work sometimes. I usually get them to do work by just saying a very loud and annoying "Aww." Teaching is fun. Story 3. I have this one teacher that will totally just say anything that's on her mind. Once she just flat out said, "Do you guys like each other or what?" to these two kids in my class. Within 3 days they were dating and still are. Okay, if they get married, she better be right on the front fucking row. Story 4. My high school teacher would change the seating chart and make your seat next to your crush if you told her. Though her one condition was that she would keep you seated next to your crush even if you guys broke up or stopped liking each other. Funny times. Story 5. Incredibly obvious. And it's also unfortunately obvious when they have a crush on you. Awkward as fuck. I've never purposely helped my students get closer to their crushes. It's already hard enough to make a seating chart without considering these things, but I don't tease them about it like some do, and might let a quick convo or note passing slip by if I catch on to what's going on. Story 6. I'm more than positive that my teacher shipped me and my now girlfriend when we were in 7th grade. For some reason, like 3 weeks into the school year, he moved a few people around and put this girl in front of me, and we started talking pretty fast. Never got mad if we were done with our work and turned to start talking to each other, never teased us either. He even rearranged the entire formation of the desks a few times and always said me and her together. We've stayed together through middle and high school, 10 years and counting, and we're planning on getting married. Story 7. God, if my 8th grade math teacher was on Reddit, she'd tell a story about how she had to tell, "Hey moron, stop playing SimCity 2000 for a second and pay attention to the girl sitting next to you who is literally professing her love to you." I was a dumbass. Okay, in your defense, SimCity 2000 was... no, I can't even defend it. Story 8. I'm a new teacher here, young and stuff, 21, as someone who went through that about 3 years ago. It's pretty obvious. During the teaching program I was in, we're assigned to a teacher to help observe and teach said class. During classroom discussions, when I let the teacher do his thing, I would just sit by and try and figure out who liked who. I was bored that I couldn't have my phone out. This one nerdy kid sat next to this girl, and he was just staring and staring. Funny thing is, groups were getting assigned to a silly project about evolution, where they would make a poster board at home, exchange phone numbers and stuff, and I got to choose the groups. My teacher mentor liked to incorporate me into class discussions and assignments. I purposely put him and this girl in a group by themselves. Most people were in groups of 3. Little man, I gotcha. Story 9. Not of a teacher, but of a former high school student. My teacher was in the middle of assigning a new seat row by row, one seat at a time. The cute foreign exchange student got placed right next to me / in my current seat, and then as she said my name in a new seat, I just yelled out, "No!" She asked me if I'd prefer to stay where I was, and I nodded. Totally bro move. Miss Zed, thank you. Miss Zed is a hero to many. Story 10. I teach grade 8, and some of the older kids will tell me, or their friends will just tell me. A lot of the 5th grade girls liked middle school boys, and they just get all giggly, and it's pretty adorable. There are a few of the slightly older kids who I can tell might end up dating when they're older just because of how they bicker. Just watching the dynamics that go on in the classroom is generally entertaining. Really? I'd imagine it's like watching a show about a hyperactive community of monkeys socializing. Story 11. As a teacher, it's usually easy to notice students that are more reserved or a little troublemakers. It's amazing how a little crush can turn Johnny Never Talks into a student who raises his hand to answer every question. I currently have one who can be a handful and is not the best at personal hygiene. One day he shows up with his hair brushed and 6 bottles of Axe body spray, and that put off red flags. Sure enough, at recess, I see him with a girl on the swings. Working with 6th grade, it's fun to watch this new stage and give them crap about their crushes. Okay, but whatever you do, do not light a match around him. Story 12. Not a teacher, but looking back on myself in high school, it had to be painfully obvious. She would take my hand and draw on it all class, and that was already a red flag. But she would also place my hand all over and give me a feel of everything. As a teenage boy, I didn't mind, but boy, it was not subtle at all. Ended up going to 2 homecomings and prom with her, so the cat was kinda out of the bag after that. Story 13. Work with middle school age students. A young guy has this massive crush on a young lady his age. The kid is so obvious about it that he might as well have just taken out a billboard. To round it all out, he is right at the age where there is a near generational difference in maturity between the average guy and the average girl. You could just see the distance in the young lady's eyes, a look of, oh dear lord, you aren't even on my intellectual plane of existence, please go away. Hilarious. Story 14. It's easy to spot with some boys when their female crush sits next to another boy and they'll loudly taunt them, saying, "Ooh, look who's sitting next to each other, have you kissed yet?" But to be honest, a lot of crushes become obvious because their friends come into class and yell at me saying things like, "George is now dating Sally," which was always embarrassing for the new couple. Most of the time my brain then goes, didn't see that coming, but guess that makes a lot of sense. Middle schoolers are adorable. Story 16. Not a teacher, but I have a story of one of my teachers with my personal relationship at the time. So, a good friend of mine had a huge crush on me, and so I did back. Now, my one teacher was a complete sweetheart, and she got on extremely well with her students. She also liked getting involved with her students in a good way. Now, a few months after my friend's first confession, one day he randomly handed me a note that read, "Count to 30 and follow me," and he left class. Now, I freaked out a little because I am a goody two-shoes and never left my class, at least not without good reason, so 30 seconds became 2 very long minutes. I could see the dude walking outside checking up on me and started to notice the class was staring at me. I was and still am extremely shy, but I knew I couldn't just leave him there. So I collected myself and asked the teacher if I can go to the ladies' room, and she quite suddenly yelled, "Yes, Sophie, please do." So I realized something was up and quickly hurried to the door. The dude had coated the whole school hall in roses, and when I followed him, I found him with a cake that asked, "Will you be my girlfriend?" This stuff sounds like it came out of a chick flick, but it actually happened, which still shakes me to this day. But yeah, apparently the whole class, especially my teacher, was in on it and set up the entire thing. In fact, my teacher was the one who helped set up the entire thing. For the rest of my high school life, that confession was like the standard for the rest of the guys in the year. I said yes, and we both dated for a few years. Unfortunately, due to personal issues for both of us, the relationship didn't last, but we didn't end on bad terms. I still consider them good friends. Story 17. Last year, one of my students, who was 13 years old, had a crush on one of his classmates, except he didn't really know how to express it. After annoying her verbally a few times, he ended up cutting a strand of her hair during class. Not very entertaining, but so cute. A few weeks ago, 2 of my students, 13 as well, held hands while going out of the classroom at the end of the lesson. They're both boys in a school where there's a lot of homophobia, and boys shouldn't show affection because it's not manly. Story 18. We always know. Teachers know everything. Any teacher who appears not to know something just has a really good poker face or is prioritizing stuff. You broke a rule and didn't get caught? We just picked our battles. You did coke in the bathroom? Dude, I've done coke. I know what a coked up teenager looks like. I can tell the difference between when you're stoned and when you're on opiates and when you're on uppers and when you've taken your meds and when you haven't taken your meds. Did you finger Stacy at the dance? The whole faculty knows. You told everyone you fingered Stacy at the dance? Well, we all know you told everyone, and we know you're a frickin' loser. You're secretly gay? We know. That's if we are pro-LGBT. If we're a bigoted rule teachers, there's a chance that we have no idea what gay even looks like. We are the all-seeing eye. Story 19. Had a student leave me a note once stating that she liked the boy sitting next to her. He used her for answers in class and then ignored her the rest of the time. She was such a sweet girl, so it was really hard to watch. I really hope she started to be interested in boys worth her time when she entered high school the following year. Story 20. Oh my god, yes, we always know. The most blatant one is when a student came to me talking about how one of the girls in class kept looking at him and he couldn't focus. It's weird, she always looks at me like a bug. I pulled her aside to ask if she liked him, and she nodded up and down really fast and excitedly. I had to talk her about not staring, and she said she understood. She stopped staring but started sitting in front of him and twerking in her seat, or dropping things and bending over to get them in front of him. They were in 6th grade. We had multiple parent-teacher conferences about it. And in 10 years, this girl will be on Reddit explaining this as an answer to something like, "What was the most embarrassing thing you did around your crush?" Story 21. Teenagers are so gossipy, they just make obvious jokes and or tell me, the teacher, who their friend's crush is just to make them feel uncomfortable. It's pretty adorable, especially since it's usually boys and they're so shy about it. Story 22. I worked in a 4th grade room with 2 other teachers, and we had a bit of a bet all year about which of the boys who had been stuck with the same class of girls since kindergarten would fall in love with the new girl. We'd constantly point out signs to each other about our favorite contenders. The poor new girl was totally oblivious to all of it. I won in the end. We overheard the boy I was betting on ask her out on the last day. She told him she wasn't quite ready to date yet. Poor boy, it's always the quiet, nerdy ones. Story 23. In grades 4 through 6, they actually interact with the opposite gender. It starts with actually talking to each other, lending pencils, etc. Eventually, they'll start antagonizing or pestering each other. At this point, when it's disrupting the class, I'll just start calling them out, and they pretend to be incredibly disgusted. Dude, just ask her out on a date already so we can move on and get back to work. Hey, it's 2019 and girls can ask out boys on a date now, so just get it over with so we can go back to our work. Story 24. I have an answer that is kind of the opposite of what you asked. When I was in 9th grade, I think, there were 2 kids in my English class who were crushing on each other. Ended up dating later, and it was obvious the teacher was shipping them. Teachers, we notice you too. Story 25. It's pretty obvious, especially the boys liking the girls and the girls having a crush on the male teacher. When I taught PE, I showed the class how to do a headstand and my shirt slipped down, up, and a couple of the girls' faces were redder than mine when I came back down. And they tease each other about it. Story 26. It's very obvious. Once when collecting midterm exams, I noticed that there were 2 exams with Hank on the front. There's only one in the class. And I'm like, "Hank, get over here. Why do you have 2 exams?" He didn't know. I went through the exams and found Megan's exam missing. She's had a crush on him for a long time and wrote his name on her exam by mistake. How one does that by mistake is still beyond me. Story 27. It's pretty easy when you assign group work and the students go ooh when you call out certain kids' names together. I end up finding it accidentally most of the time, but some kids are really open about it. Funny story, I once paired up a guy with his crush since I thought he would take it more seriously to do the chemistry lab together. The experiment was to explore the different tests for gases, burning splint for hydrogen, glowing splint for oxygen, lime water for carbon dioxide, etc. The girl got so startled by the pop noise from the hydrogen gas test that she yelped, dropped the test tube, and fell backwards. Miraculously, the guy caught both her and the test tube, and the entire class whistled and cheered. They started dating shortly after, and we were still together when I left the school the year after. Story 28. In the 1st grade, I gave Brandon this note that was basically like, "I like you, do you like me? Circle yes or no." And that little snitch-ass bitch took it to our teacher and she reprimanded me in front of the whole class. "Mrs. Page, I hope you're dead or 150 and miserable." Anyway, I cried and I got reprimanded for that. Geez, sounds like a reality TV show. Story 29. Kindergarten here. Kids that crush on a teacher. Very obvious and endearing. I have one student this year that has some ridiculous game for a 5-year-old boy. His compliments are top tier. "Miss Shelby, I love you to death. You're the cutest girl here. I want to share my Ritz. You've had a hard day." If it wasn't wildly inappropriate, I would tell him to make sure to use condoms when he was older. This Valentine, I witnessed a girl drop her street address, since no one had a home phone anymore, into a little boy's bag. He was by far the smartest boy in the class, and I secretly applauded her choices. How I reacted to it depends more on the student's home/life situation. The harder the home life, the more I let him indulge in his fantasies so that he has a better chance at getting a positive relationship with the school environment. I know when they get older, they will always look for escapes from their home environment, and I always hope that that place they run to is the school. Story 30. This reminds me of my 7th grade social studies class. The girl who I had crushed on since first grade was in it, and, well, halfway through the second week, my teacher changed the seats around. I sat in the last seat of the second row, and the person who sat in front of me was that girl. Needless to say, the whole class made a lot of commotion when it happened. 12-year-old me enjoyed the view the best I had. Story 31. So it's not me, but my friend was a substitute teacher, and the first time he had a certain class, a girl in the classroom yelled to her friend outside, "Girl, hey, get in here, Maya, we have a substitute teacher." To which the friend responded, "Is he hot?" Don't quite know if it qualifies, but it was pretty funny when he told me. Story 32. I'm not actually a proper teacher, but last summer I was an English teacher for a local community English learning center in China. There was this kid who asked me which class this girl was attending, and I told him just to come every lesson. I asked him why, and he just said, "She can help me with what I don't understand." I said I could too, but he said, "It's just not the same." And every time we had the lesson, he would also sit next to that girl and get salty whenever someone else sat next to her. The kid's a massive pussy though. 18 lessons and never even made the first move. Story 33. I was a Hebrew school teacher. These two kids were the smartest in their class. They knew everything backwards and forwards, and they sat next to each other and would find excuses to talk, like pretending they didn't know something. Josh, she knew that you knew the Mariv Aruvim by heart. Ali, he knew that you knew the prayers before and after Torah backwards. Eventually, I asked the teacher, who I trained, long story here, if I could help them. I took them to another room and I said, "I know you both know everything. Here's some extra work to get through, work on it together, and I'll be back in the room if you need me." It was just the hot tikva, basic stuff. Last I heard, they're engaged, and no wedding invite for old shoe truck. Typical Josh and Ellie. I think this is the most Jewish thing I've ever read. Story 34. Right, one time this kid had a crush on some girl. Everyone knew except her. It was hilarious to see this kid try and try while the girl didn't take the hint. You could tell because he kept looking at her from across the room. So as any great teacher would do, I moved them next to each other when I arranged the seating plan. I also put them as partners for most of the practices, basically the British version of assignments, and then one day this kid was walking to a seat and I heard his friend say, "He's gonna do it." I pondered to myself, what's going on? And then I remember and watch in excitement. The kid then falls on his own foot while approaching the girl and smashes his nose into her chair. At least the girl noticed him and helped him. Sorry to say, he ruined his chances that day. Story 35. I teach middle school and have to proctor our state exams at the end of each school year. Because it's a state exam and there are so many rules about what students can and can't do, I'm required to circle around the room to monitor them. One year, I see this boy try to secretly slide a note to the girl next to him. Thinking he was giving her help with the text, I grabbed it. As I'm taking it, he said, "Please, no." And the note read, "I think I'm falling in love with you." I looked back at him, and he had the biggest nervous eyes. I simply threw it out and didn't say anything. Wow, way to crush his dreams. Story 36. High school coach middle school teacher caught one of the senior boys sandbagging while running to talk with a junior girl. I would try to put them in groups where they can do peer training. The boys playing one-on-one and the girls pair watch for fouls or better moves. The two of them improved so much that they actually watched and helped each other. She set records for steals in a season for our whole state conference, and he set a team record for goals. He asked her out during his senior speech after the season. They've been dating for 3 years. He's at Johns Hopkins as a student, and she's a student/athlete at W&J. I drive the 2.5 hours to pick him up before I take the girls' team to go and watch weekend games 4 hours in the Northwest. Story 37. What a fitting question for tonight. I just came back from supervising a party at school and watched 2 7th graders finally become a couple. They both had been distracted during lessons for a few weeks, always watching each other when they thought that the other one wasn't looking, or clumsily flirting during group work. Tonight, they were so cute, first talking, later holding hands, and finally kissing. Well, actually more of a peck, in front of our friends who all cheered. Congrats to that dude. Story 38. I teach 4th grade, and last year 2 of my students were sitting next to each other in the assembly hall, sitting on the floor of the gym, and I noticed that they just had their pinkies on top of each other. I was sitting behind them, so I whispered, "Cooties," and they got all weird and awkward when they realized I had discovered them, even though it was not that subtle.